The 15 Truths About Vikings, what history books won't tell you. Vikings have always been a subject of fascination for any audience across the world. Several movies and series have taken up the Nordic warriors as the subjects for their world. However, these cornucopias of games and movies do little justice to them, as they are often portrayed wrongly. They are seen as ruthless and bloodthirsty groups of people lacking empathy and are equivalent to monsters who roam in the world. You're watching Historical Saga, and in today's video we'll discuss the truth about Vikings, which is not known by many. As we're about to start, we would appreciate if you hit the like and subscribe button with all of your might to pay respect to the long-lost Vikings. Recent archaeological findings shed light on the intellect and advanced societal features of a typical Viking society that was equal to none during its contemporary times. Here is the countdown of the 15 most amazing truths about Vikings. Have you ever tried to start a fire with your own urine? Well, the Vikings did just that to guarantee their survival in some of the harshest climates on Earth. But how do you start fire with urine? The Vikings had a scientific mind and used to boil touchwood fungus with their urine for days on end to produce a smooth, concentrated substance that would be used to kindle a fire. This substance was extremely valuable for its fire-causing potential, as the cold climate of the tundra necessitated fire as a means of existence for the Vikings. Up next is a show of Viking brutality, the Blood Eagle. This was a ritualistic form of execution often implemented against prisoners or even enslaved people. The Vikings used to tie the person from limb to limb, usually against a tree or a staff, and they used to cut out the ribs from behind and break the rib bone to reveal the lungs. They then used to take out the lungs and spread them on the ribs to make it look like the person had wings like an eagle. The longer the person stayed alive, the more pain they would experience. Now for some Viking style. The Vikings had designed grooves into their own teeth for fashion purposes and used to color them red through the use of red raisins. However, it is now believed that the coloring served multiple purposes, especially as warriors used them to look dangerous and more intimidating to their enemies. It may also have been a symbol of social status or achievements. Up next, we look into the lives of Viking children. The Vikings lived in some of the world's harshest and most difficult conditions. Needless to say, only the strongest survived the test of time. They were obsessed with strength, and the children considered weak were left alone or even thrown into the sea. The children who fell ill or suffered congenital problems did not live long, as their parents did not entertain a weak family member. The children who reached 5 years of age would begin their training to improve their fighting abilities and turn them into warriors who would be feared worldwide. The others were taught to work on farms. Interested in more Viking fashion? Did you know that Vikings used eyeliner? This is believed to be a version of coal eyeliner that is believed to have been made out of antimony, burnt almonds, lead, and oxidized copper, amongst other ingredients. In 950 AD, an Arab traveler managed to reach the Vikings, and he too had recorded that the eyeliner that they used was completely natural and made them look more attractive. And one last point, the eyeliner was used by both sexes. Whenever we think of a Viking, the image of a blonde warrior comes to mind. But how come that is the perception of the Vikings? Where did this obsession with blonde hair come from? The Vikings were usually born blonde, but were known to have red hues, and many were brunettes as well. However, there was a societal emphasis on blonde hair color. The pressure meant that men had to dye their hair lighter by using a mixture of soap and lye that was used to bleach their hair. They even used that on their beards. Alright, so it's that time in the video when we'll ask you if you have subscribed to us yet or not. So how about you do it without us bothering you at all? Moving on, have you ever heard of the Berserkers? These were special Viking warriors who used to go into battle clad in hides of animal clothes like bears and wolves. The funny thing is that they didn't wear normal armor at all. Wait, who on earth goes to war without armor? Well, apparently the Vikings believed that wearing the hides of animals gave them animalistic strengths that could be used in battle. Cool, right? These warriors used to spend time in isolation to get the power of beasts. About how much it actually worked, well, we are not so sure. Are you ready for yet another Viking war fact? The Vikings used to eat mushrooms before going into battle. Yes, the most fearsome warriors of the world used to derive their power from mushrooms. But that's not the end. How did they consume these mushrooms? Well, that part is honestly disgusting. The only mushrooms that the Vikings had access to were extremely potent and had the power to make the warriors that ate them throw up or even lose their consciousness. The solution? Well, first feed these mushrooms to your local shaman, and as whatever goes in comes out. Collect her urine in your drinking glasses and, well, bottoms up. Apparently the drink was a less potent version of the mushroom. Thankfully we do not know the effects of this drink, and honestly it would be rather good if nobody tried to find out either. Whenever we are told to picture a Viking, the thing that comes to our mind first are those huge horned helmets. But the funny thing is that Vikings never wore that kind of helmet. Viking sources have never shown a warrior wearing a horned helmet, and all those archaeological searches have revealed just a single helmet of that kind that may have belonged to a Viking. But it is more than likely that this helmet was either used for ritualistic purposes or simply for fashion. The trend of depicting Vikings with horned helmets began in the 19th centuries when painters were inspired by German warriors who wore horned helmets. Up next is a very important aspect of Viking life: hygiene. Considering the fact that Vikings went on long raids across the oceans on long boats and lived in the most frigid regions of the world, it might be safe to consider that these warriors might have smelled like dying mice. However, nothing could have been further from reality. They were experienced in maintaining personal hygiene and even possessed combs, tweezers, and even ear cleaners. These were made of animal bone and worked pretty well. The importance of boats to Viking life has recently come to the surface. While they did use boats to go raiding across the world, they were very symbolic as well because they were often associated with death. When a beloved warrior died, his body used to be kept on his boat surrounded by gold and weapons, and sometimes even slaves who were generally sacrificed to the Viking deities to accompany their master. The boats were then pushed into the open ocean. The belief was that the boat would escort them to Valhalla, where departed warriors were allowed to feast, battle, and fornicate for all eternity. Better than your simple concept of heaven, right? As much as the Vikings were into their boats, they were equally associated with the slave trade. During their raids to Anglo-Saxon, Celtic, and Slavic areas, they often abducted people to be taken as slaves. Although they used to call them thralls, they actively traded them across the world, but mainly in the Middle East. By the way, the trade actually made them very rich. There is one eye-catching feature of the Viking society of that time, and it was their women. The Viking women had a lot more rights than their counterparts anywhere across the globe at that time and were allowed to inherit property, divorce their husbands, and even get their dowry back if the marriage failed. For the people who were depicted as the most bloodthirsty and ruthless across the globe, these are a surprising set of benefits that pointed to a far higher level of gender equality in the Viking society. By the way, the advantages were restricted to the Viking women only, and not the slave girls. They were considered property through and through. Who discovered America? No, it was not Christopher Columbus. It was actually the Vikings who are reputed to have reached the shores of America first. Records have proven that the first Viking expeditions reached modern-day Newfoundland somewhere around 1000 AD. That is around 500 years before Columbus was even born. And for the last Viking fact, the Vikings were great fans of skiing. Archaeological digs have discovered several primitive skis that were used by these warriors in their free time. In fact, they loved skiing so much, they even had a god devoted to skiing called Ultra. Did you enjoy this video? Then don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel to keep getting updates on our new videos.